one of my systems is to continually experiment with systems. So my big system is that if I hear of somebody else's system and it's practical to do so, I'll try to duplicate it and see if it works for me. And if it doesn't, then I'll move on to another system. Let me start with an idea, a system that I heard from Marc Andreessen. Marc Andreessen, you know him as the rich tech investor who was creator of Netscape, etc. And I heard him talking about a system that I'd never used before, had not heard of. I'm not sure if he invented it or he's popularizing it, but he talked about instead of having a to-do list, which can be overwhelming, the size of your to-do list can just keep growing, he recommended having a done list, a list of things you've completed. And I heard that, and I have to admit, my first reaction was, what? Why would that work? Like, what would make that a good system? And I didn't quite feel it. But it never left my mind because, number one, Marc Andreessen said it. Because he tends to be sort of ahead of the curve on just figuring out life, apparently. And he's a real smart guy. And I thought, well, one of my systems is to continually experiment with systems. So my big system is that if I hear of somebody else's system and it's practical to do so, I'll try to duplicate it and see if it works for me. And if it doesn't, then I'll move on to another system. So I tried it out, and I'm quite happy with it. And here's the part I was missing. So here's my done list. So what my new system for getting things done, at least around the house, errands and home repair, is that I'll write each thing on a card, and then when it's done, I'll put a check next to it. So in this case, I had to repair some door handles. I had to fix a power washer, I had to replace a GFI, I had to relocate some files, I had to fix a remote control, and it was one of the TVs that wasn't working. So one by one, I would write a little pile of things that I had to do, each of them on their own card. And then if there was any interim progress, I would write on the back of the card something like, I called a repair person, or I'm waiting for a part, or something like that. So I'd remind myself. So then I started knocking off tasks. And here's the fun part, and why this system is way better than I had imagined. When I'm looking at a list of things to do, it makes me unhappy and demotivated because it's so big. And I end up spending all my time just rearranging the list. It's like, add another thing to the list. And then I've added so many things to the list, it's literally overwhelming. And I just say, does it matter if I even do one thing on that list? The list is so long, there's no point in doing one of 35 things. Tomorrow I'm still going to have 34 things on the list. I'll probably add one. It's just completely demotivating because the list is so freaking long. In my case, I could easily make a list of 35 chores that just really need to get done. So instead, I make a smaller list as I think of it. I write them on a card, and I'm getting to the good part. And each time I complete something, I check it. But here's what I found. As my list of done projects started increasing, and I started impressing myself at how I'd gotten things done, like there are things on this list that are over a year that needed to be done. Like one of my TVs didn't work for a year. A remote control for another TV didn't work for a year. But what I found is that when I enjoyed looking through the list of what I've done, I had easily forgotten my accomplishments. And each one of them is like a little hit of dopamine. I don't know if it's dopamine, might be some other chemical, but it makes me happy. And so I think somebody used the word in the comments here. I managed to gamify my to-do list so that instead of a big imposing list that I don't even want to look at, and I can't tell you how many times I've gone through this process, make a to-do list, and then I will never look at that list again because it makes me sad. And I'm not kidding. I make my list probably, I would guess hundreds of times over my entire life, I've made to-do lists and then I can't look at them. I can't move my head to look at my list. I could grab myself by the head and say, look at the list, Scott. Look at the to-do list. But I can't, because it makes me incredibly sad and anxious. So now I look at my done list. And when I look at my done list, I say to myself, I'd like to add one to that list. So I look at my to-do list and I find what I can add. And then I say, oh, this is going to be fun. I'm going to add another thing to the done list. And then I add it and it feels good. And at the end of the process, I've turned this horrible experience of things to do into this gamified, hey, look at this. And then I'm saving the list so when I see Christina next, she's doing a little traveling. But when I see her next, I'll say, look at all the things I got done. You know, that thing you wanted fixed, I got that fixed.